Hey, 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 welcome to Mikayo Messenger. It's great to be with you guys today. Thank you so much for all the love that's been poured out these last few days. I'm really grateful for that, and I just want to give some thank you back to you guys. Thanks so much for your support. Praying for my health initially, and then now my daughter's situation, so I appreciate that, and I appreciate the prayers that keep coming in as we are still going through it, so if you can continue to bring us those prayers, or I should say bring the Lord to prayers, we greatly appreciate that. And God is answering those prayers, praise God. So I look forward to giving more updates on that in the fellowship, which you can find in the first link in this description, and then also in the community page as I'm able to do so. Also, if you feel so moved, this is my full-time job. We are a full-time ministry here. So if you want to help support us, it goes a long way, and you can do that in the link in the description, and allows us to do this for you. So thank you so much for that. Also, please hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're still subscribed, and please ask your friends to subscribe as well. So you may have noticed that Chuckster is back in the news yet again. Should we be surprised? Don't think so. You know, it's really up to God to reveal who's doing what these days. But to say that Chucky's not involved would, I think, be a blind sight, to say the least. He's certainly got his finger in the pudding in every which way till Tuesday. And boy, we're going to cover a lot of ground here today. And a 7-year covenant is involved in that, as well as many other fulfillments of Scripture. I know you might be holding out for Mr. O, Mr. T, and who knows else, the beast from the abyss. And that may all play out as well. We shall see. But no question that definitely the Chuckster is involved. We can say, to say the least. So again, it would be short-sighted if we didn't recognize that. So, interesting title to this article. This is in Fox, saying King Chuckster the third, that's also 666 in Hebrew, launches climate clock that tells us what to do and by when. Oh, he's already dictating our lives. See how easy that is? So he's already telling us what to do and by when with his little climate clock that he started up here on the 28th, and that was with Mr. Sadiq Khan man that he is, in the mayor of London there. And boy, little Sadiq just couldn't wait to get his hands on that buzzer. Let me tell you, man, you got to watch the video on that one. He was chomping at the bit, and I was surprised Chucky didn't do it, but he has other people do things for him, so not surprised about that, I guess. So in any case, they set this clock in motion, and this clock is 6 years and 24 days is what this clock is set to. Now, what an odd time to pick, right? Why would you pick 6 years and 24 days? You'd think if you're going to start a clock, you would pick a round number, like an even 6 years or an even 7 years or 6.5 years or 6 years and 6 months or something like that. But they specifically picked 6 years and 24 days. So when I first heard that, I thought, okay, that's definitely a little odd. 24 is divisible by 6, which is interesting. 6 times 4 is 24, last time I checked. So you've got 5 6s there. That's kind of interesting. Certainly there's at least 3 6s in there as well. So that's kind of intriguing in and of itself. You could add 2 and 4 together. That's 6. You got 2 times 6. There's lots of ways you could play with those numbers. But in any case, 6 years and 24 days. Okay, so we're like, okay, why? What is that all about? That's a little odd, wouldn't you say? And this clock is not just in one spot. It's actually at 150 different locations in the U to the K, including Piccadilly Circus, where they have this huge Jumbotron wrap around the building there, similar to what you see at a countdown for New Year's Eve or something like that. So they're counting down the years. Counting down the years. So they're counting down the years to bring this in. Now, I noticed this podium I thought was kind of interesting. It has this kind of sparkles in it, and I don't know if that's supposed to be like blue cobalt or something, or like the Kaaba and Mecca, or I don't know what we're supposed to maybe make of that, but I thought that was kind of intriguing. Here they're laughing. We got them by the scruff of their necks. And Sadiq's leaning over. Do you think we should tell him? You think we should tell him it's all a lie? No. We're having too much fun. So anyway, so those two sillies are messing with our lives, to say the least. But in any case, so they kicked the button off on June 28th for 6 years and 24 days. Again, 150 locations have this clock. 150. Let that sink in for a second. 150. Not like one in, Piccadilly Circus. That's sort of the Times Square of London there, or, maybe a few other locations, but 150 versions of the clock around the UK, London, Birmingham, Glasgow, Manchester, Edinburgh, and Southampton. Wow. So it's in Edinburgh, so it's in Scotland too. Don't know, is Ireland included in there too? Wales, or maybe Northern Ireland probably, and Wales would probably be included in there also. So wow, 150 locations. Now, is this thing going to just click off every day? I mean, is this going to be a nonstop thing where you're going to see it there every day for 6 years and 24 days? It seems like that might be the case, because they kind of have it on the side and along the bottom, and then maybe they'll still show ads, periodically, as they go back to the clock. So that remains to be seen. But they're loving it. We got him now. We got him now. The rider on the white horse is riding. He's going out to conquer and to conquer. Prevail, 7-year covenant will prevail. Ho, ho, ho. Now, there may be other covenants. We talk about that in a lot of other videos, so I won't go deep into that. But you can't deny this man is in the eye. Okay, so very interesting. Let's keep going on this. So, 6 years and 24 days. What does it all mean? Now, there is another website that has a climate clock. Oh, I realize you can't see this too well. Let me go back over here and bring this down. But they have the clock on their website. Same clock. And this is climateclock.world. You can go and check this out if you want to see it. It's also in New York. It's in Seoul, Korea. It's in Glasgow. So it's all over the place. So don't worry, it's coming to a town near you too. It's coming to your 15-minute city. Oh yes. So yeah, this is all part of the prison that we're in. So and you think, what a genius way to get everybody to capitulate, right? Because the problem they had with the bug is that it sort of has a short lifespan. You can only do a pan of the dem to the ick for so long, and then it kind of wears out. But this is something that can go on forever. The climate never changes. The climate that changes never changes. It's always there. And climate change, that's called the weather. That happens every day. And so, in any case, but I like that the title of that article says it'll tell you what to do and by when. So the whole idea is that this is a way to get everybody in the whole world to conform to an agenda of the duh, and to get you to do whatever they want you to do. And they can always just point to the clock and say, yeah, but the clock says you can't drive your car today. I'm sorry. The clock says you can't have a car. Well, the clock says you can't eat that. It's just bad for the environment. The clock says you're breathing too much. I'm sorry, we're going to have to eliminate you. See? And that's where it'll eventually get to as they shoot to, towards, no pun intended, towards 95% of the population that they look to eradicate from this planet, all in the name of good things, right? It's good things. Probably get to the point where people will be sacrificing their own children, much like Molech, right? It's like, oh, I'm sorry, you're going to have to choose one member of your family to donate to the cause, and on and on and on with all the ridiculousness will it go. Okay, so let's keep going here. So basically that's what the climate clock does. It has a deadline, no pun intended, but it is intended, as we'll see. They even capitalize the word deadline and Lifeline, I think, is the other one. I'll show you that in a second. But it basically tells you how long we have until the carbon budget runs out, okay? Now, in case you didn't know, the plants need CO2 to breathe. Plants cannot exist without CO2. So that's the symbiosis that God has already created in the world, is that we breathe out, the plants breathe in, and then the plants breathe out oxygen, and we breathe that in. See how that works? So you really don't want to get rid of CO2. CO2 is actually a positive thing for the environment. So the whole thing is insane, right? What you want to get rid of is, maybe carbon monoxide or something like that, but not dioxide. Carbon dioxide is actually what helps the plants to grow. So, kind of insane, isn't it? So they say it all goes back to the science, and then they put a big period right after that. Like, that says it all. Just say the word science, and that sums it up. Don't ask questions. Don't try to dig into it. Don't try to explore it on your own. Don't try to figure this out. Don't try to get hard data. No. Just say science. Science. She blinded me with science. Ooh, ooh, ooh. They blinded us with science. Da-da-da. Well, that's what they're doing. They're trying to blind us with science. Just the word. That's all they really say. And they throw out a couple, we have to get it to 1.5 Celsius. And right now we're at 12.5% and rising. And yada, yada, yada. But they don't really give you any hard data. They don't really give you any, panel of real scientists who are actually really figuring this out. They just sort of say this so that they can convince you. Now, notice what it says here. It says, we have one deadline, capital D, and many lifelines, capital L. And they do that throughout this article, which I thought was a little odd, because deadline, why are you capitalizing it? What are you really trying to say? You want us all dead? Is that what you're trying to get at? Well, that's what Mr. Gates said, as we'll talk about in a little bit. But yes, it says the science, quote unquote, is clear. We are in a climate emergency. Decades of increasing carbon emissions are harming the natural and societal systems upon which humanity depends, threatening untold ecological and human devastation if we do not act in time. The good news is there's still time. Oh, there's always time. And this is what I realized with the psychopaths, is that they use time as a weapon against you. So they say, yes, millions and billions and trillions of years ago, there was nothing, and then suddenly dinosaurs appeared, and then you came along, and it's all happened over many, many years. Of course, they weren't there, you weren't there, so nobody can really back that up. It's just fantasy, see? But they do it into the future, too. It's fantasy. It's like, ooh, yes, in 10 years, we'll all be gone. Didn't they say that 10 years ago? Didn't they say that 20 years ago? Didn't they say that 30 years ago? Of course they did. They say it every 10 years, and now they're getting down to 7 years. Ooh, let's cut it down a little bit. So that's the whole idea, is to keep you in constant fear of the unknown. Oh, I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. Can you see it? I can't see it. Are we breathing it in? I don't know. Oh, it's so scary. Okay, and then this is really what's happening to the climate right here. This is an ability they've had for quite some time, the weather to the modification. And yes, so this is where they act intentionally manipulating and altering the weather. And it's something they have the ability to do now. So when you see all these tornadoes suddenly happening in places that never happened before, and hurricanes and earthquakes and all these things, you have to ask, you have to wonder, you have to scratch your chin and say, could this be planned? Could this be something that people are instituting? Interesting that they talk about the 7 years war here when they're talking about this subject, because that's what basically we're going through now. It's just going to be a 7-year war against sanity, or for the sake of sanity. Depends on what side you're fighting on. So, very intriguing. Okay, so let's take a look at this clock, shall we? So this clock started on June 28th of 2023. Now, the first thing that came to mind was this random, what seems random, 24 days. I'm like, 24 days, okay. Because, what are we at? We're at June. So you would think maybe they'd say 6 years and 6 months, roughly, right? Because the 28th of June, that's basically the end of the 6 months. So that would line up with 7, right? If they said 6 years and 6 months. But no, they said 6 years and 24 days. I'm like, 24 days? Okay, so the first question is, well, what happens in 24 days? Right? That's the first thing that popped into my head. So you put that in the handy-dandy calculator here, and it brings us to Saturday, July 22nd. So 24 days from today is Saturday, July 22nd. Now, don't forget that date, July 22nd, because you know what? We're going to see it again and again and again. Isn't that interesting? Wow, how does it always work out that way? Maybe because there's a plan. Okay, so Saturday, July 22nd. Interesting. So what happens on Saturday, July 22nd of this year? Well, let's take a look, shall we? July 22nd lands here in the upper right-hand corner. You see where it says the number 4 in blue? Well, that's actually July 22nd. The 4 is for the Hebrew calendar. And July 22nd, you see in the small print. That lands on Shabbat Chazon, or Masai, also Masai. Now, why is that a significant date? Okay, let's take a look, shall we? Shabbat Chazon, no, not calzone. Okay, this is not a stuffed bread item with cheese inside. No, this is Shabbat Chazon, and this is the Shabbat, or the Sabbath, before Tisha B'Av. Okay, Tisha B'Av. What is Tisha B'Av? We just talked about that in the last video. Can you believe how all these videos are lining up? I'm not planning this, folks. I'm just simply responding to what's happening, and it just happens that all these things are lining up. So I just did a video, this video here called July 4th, The Morning Begins. Be sure to go watch that video, talking about the connection with the 17 days from Tammuz 17 to the 9th of Av, and it's these 3 weeks, not 17 days, sorry, but from 3 weeks, 21 days of mourning. And so be sure to check that out, but that connects with what I'm sharing with you today, as do several other videos, so it's just kind of amazing how this all connects. But Shabbat Chazon is the Sabbath before the 9th of Av, and it's unique. The Shabbat before the 9th of Av is called Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbat of vision. Okay, after the opening words of the day's reading from the prophets Haftarah, which is the third of the series of readings known as the Three of Rebuke. The Three of Rebuke. On this Shabbat, say the Hasidic masters, we are granted a vision of the third temple. We may not see it with our physical eyes, but our souls see it and are empowered to break free from our present state of galut, exile and spiritual displacement, and bring about the redemption and the rebuilding of the temple. Wow. So they connect this particular day and time with the third temple. Now, we all know that we are the third temple as Christians. We hold the Holy Spirit in us. We no longer need. That's why God tore the curtain into when Jesus was crucified and the great earthquake, etc. And ultimately the temple was torn down 40 years later, because you don't need a physical temple anymore. But the Jews haven't gotten that message. So they're still planning on building this third physical temple on earth in the same place, they hope, and probably will be as they build the other two. But that remains to be seen. In any case, the Three of Rebuke. So what this time is basically, this is in this period of mourning. And this is a time where the Jews are being rebuked by the scriptures, which is exactly what Jacob's trouble is all about, exactly what the tribulation is all about. It's exactly what all of it's about. So isn't it perfect that they would time this out so that it lines up with this time as well? Now, one of the passages that they read during this time is in Isaiah chapter 1. Isaiah, amazing book. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to do so. It's chock full of amazing prophecies. But Isaiah chapter 1 talks about the vision, because Shabbat Chazon means the vision concerning Judah and Jerusalem that Isaiah son of Amoz saw during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. I just want to read this to you so you get a sense of what we're talking about here. This is the rebukes that Israel's receiving and that we are going to be going through here in these next 7 years, perhaps. So, okay, let's look at this. A rebellious nation, hear, O heavens, listen, O earth, for the Lord has spoken. I reared children and brought them up, but they have rebelled against me. The ox knows his master, the donkey his owner's manger, but Israel does not know, my people do not understand. Ah, sinful nation, a people loaded with guilt, a brood of evildoers. Wow, sounds very much like Jesus, right? You brood of vipers. children given to corruption. They have forsaken the Lord, they have spurned the Holy One of Israel, and turned their backs on him. Why should you be beaten any more? Why do you persist in rebellion? Your whole head is injured, your whole heart is afflicted. From the sole of your foot to the top of your head there is no soundness, only wounds and welts and open sores, not cleansed or bandaged or soothed with oil. Your country is desolate, your cities burned with fire. Your fields are being stripped by foreigners right before you. Whoa, that's deep, because they're going to be trampled on by the Gentiles for 42 months. Right before you laid waste as when overthrown by strangers. The daughter of Zion is left like a shelter in a vineyard, like a hut in a field of melons. Field of melons. Did you ever think that phrase was in the Bible? Like a city under siege. Unless the Lord Almighty had left us some survivors, we would have become like Sodom. We would have been like Gomorrah. Wow. And frequently Jerusalem is called Sodom in a spiritual sense as well. Hear the word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom. Listen to the law of our God, you people of Gomorrah. The multitude of your sacrifices, what are they to me, says the Lord? I have more than enough of burnt offerings, of rams, and the fat of fattened animals. I have no pleasure in the blood of bulls and lambs and goats. That's exactly what happens when Jesus dies for our sins, right? God no longer wants any other offering. Jesus is the one offering for all time, so he can be done with all these bulls, lambs, and goats. When you come to appear before me, who has asked this of you, this trampling of my courts? Wow, trampling of the courts. There it is. Stop bringing meaningless offerings. Your incense is detestable to me. New moons, Sabbaths, and convocations. I cannot bear your evil assemblies. Your new moon festivals and your appointed feasts my soul hates. Ooh, man, pretty intense. So God is not happy with their celebrations. They've become a burden to me. I'm weary of bearing them. When you spread out your hands in prayer, I will hide my eyes from you. Even if you offer many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. Wash and make yourselves clean. Take your evil deeds out of my sight. Stop doing wrong. Learn to do right. Seek justice. Encourage the oppressed. Defend the cause of the fatherless. Plead the case of the widow. Wow, sounds very much like Jesus, what he came to do when he read Isaiah 61, I believe it is. Come now, let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they are red as crimson, they shall be like wool. If you are willing and obedient, you will eat the best from the land. But if you resist and rebel, you will be devoured by the sword. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. See how the faithful city has become a harlot. Sounds very much like Revelation 17, the harlot, right? And the 7 hills. Often people mention that Israel has 7 hills as well. So, and that the spiritual harlot, so to speak. She once was full of justice. Righteousness used to dwell in her, but now murderers. Your silver has become dross. Your choice wine is diluted with water. Your rulers are rebels, companions of thieves. They all love bribes and chase after gifts. They do not defend the cause of the fatherless. The widow's case does not come before them. Sounds very much like the rebuke that Jesus gave to the Pharisees. Therefore, the Lord Almighty, the Mighty One of Israel, declares, I will get relief from my foes and avenge myself on my enemies. I will turn my hand against you. I will thoroughly purge away your dross and remove all your impurities. See, that's what this time of Jacob's trouble is, a time of cleansing. It's a time, you think of it as wrath, but it's really God purging. He's purging, he's gleaning. He's getting the last of his harvest that's going to come in. Afterward, you will be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city. Zion will be redeemed with justice, her penitent ones with righteousness. But rebels and sinners will both be broken, and those who forsake the Lord will perish. You will be ashamed because of the sacred oaks in which you have delighted. You will be disgraced because of the gardens that you have chosen. You will be like an oak with fading leaves, like a garden without water. The mighty man will become tinder and his work a spark. Both will burn together with no one to quench the fire. What an opening to Isaiah. Wow, that's the first chapter. If that doesn't grip you by your seat, don't know what will. Woo, talk about a movie opener, right? Like when you open up a movie, you always open it with the action and something intense, and you're like, whoa, man, what's going to happen next? So that's what they read on this fateful day, July 22nd, 2023, okay? Just to go back to the calendar here for a second. July 22nd, 2023, that's what they're going to be reading, okay? It's the Shabbat before the 9th of Av. Wow, pretty powerful. Now that's within the 3 weeks of mourning that comes between Tammuz 17, that we just talked about in the last video, and the 9th of Av that's coming up as well. Pretty intense. Okay, let us continue. So what's also intriguing about this day is it's not just It's not just a time of vision, but it's also known as the Black Sabbath. Whoa, I'm not talking about the heavy metal band here, guys. But it's called the Black Sabbath due to its status as the saddest Shabbat of the year. It's the saddest Shabbat of the year. It's the saddest Sabbath. Say that 10 times fast. Saddest Sabbath, saddest Sabbath. Saddest Sabbath of the year. And they call it the Black Sabbath. Wow. That is pretty intense. Now we know the Satanists love their Black Sabbaths, right? They're all about that. In fact, I did this video about the possible Black Mass happening at the same time as Chucky's Cora of the Nation. So isn't that interesting that it happens to fall on the darkest day, what they consider to be the darkest Sabbath of the year? Yes, 9th of Av is itself because it falls right before 9th of Av, and it's in this window between Tammuz 17 and 9th of Av, which is 3 weeks of mourning because there's a lot of stuff that took place in that time frame. It's also the time of Masai, or Masai, and that means journeys, and talks about all the journeys that they took in the Bible. Could this be a time when the Christians journey home? You know, could it be a time of beginning Jacob's trouble or Jacob's journey? Like this is going to be a journey for them as they go through this time of struggle. We hope that we're not here to go through it as well, right? That's the idea, is that God is going to take us away for that hour of trial, but very intriguing. Okay, so then I thought, 6 years, 24 days. Then I thought backwards. I'm like, okay, well, what would we need to get to 7 years? Okay, well, let's take 365, which would be how many days are in a year. Let's subtract those 24 days, and what do we get? We get 341, and that's what we need to count backwards, right? 341 to get to the start of the 7 years that we're looking at. So where does that take us? Well, if you take 628.23, you subtract 341, wouldn't you know it, you land on July 22nd. There it is all over again. Is that coinky-dink, do you think? Don't think so. But let's keep going here. So check this out. So that lands on July 22nd of 2022. So as far as they're concerned, the 7 years, these final 7 years, if they turn out to be final, started on July 22nd of 2022. Okay? Now let's look at the calendar and check that out. Okay, so July 22nd, 2022, well, that is right after the 17th of Tammuz. As you see on the left-hand side, the fast of 4th month, that's the 17th of Tammuz, we just talked about in the last video. And that is that during that first week. So it's kind of equidistant, like the one coming up in 22. In fact, let's take a look at that for a second. You basically have 1, 2, 3, 4 days in between, and this one looks similar. Let's see. What do you got? 1, 2, 3, 4 days in between. Wow, that's pretty amazing. Okay, so from start to finish, so basically you have the 17th, which is the fast of the 4th month. Then in 4 days, you have July 22nd. And then you have the Chiasmus. It's a Chiasmus. So this year, we have the reverse of that, where it's 4 days. You have July 22nd, then 4 days, and then you have 9th of Av. So you have the bookend there of the 2 days that kick off and end the 3 weeks of mourning. Wow, that's pretty intense. So that's July 22nd. So that's when they began their 7 years. This final 7 years of their 14 years total that started in 2015. That's what they're counting, okay? Now, again, God may have a whole different schedule and plan, but we do know that it does say in Daniel 9, he will confirm a covenant. Doesn't mean he initiates a covenant. It doesn't mean the covenant starts at that point. He's simply confirming it, which is going to happen this year of this covenant. This 7 years is going to be confirmed at their upcoming COP conference, as well as perhaps in September as well. But the COP is in December. So, I mean, you can't deny all those connections, right? Now, if something else magically appears and we go, oh no, this is the 7 year covenant, okay, and there is also Christ who confirmed his covenant. So again, when you go back and read Daniel 9, you'll see it's like an overlap of Messiah and anti-Messiah, or Christ and Antichrist, in the same passage. So Christ also confirmed the 7 year covenant, you could argue, meaning the 7,000 years, because God, a day is like 1,000 years. So he also confirmed that 7,000 years that we are spending of this age, because Jesus said, till the end of the age, I'll be with you. And he also confirmed that on the cross. So different parallels there, but very interesting. Okay, let's keep going. So again, check out this video. Just talked about all this. It's really interesting that it happened to tie in. Wasn't expecting that. Okay, but I suppose I should be at this point, right? Okay, so what is this July 22nd? Why is it so important? Well, they actually declared it to be Climate Emergency Day. That's what it is. It has been officially declared July 22nd as Climate Emergency Day. Says right here, it's based on the concept. Last Friday, July 22nd at 5 p.m., hundreds of thousands of people around the globe gathered for a moment of silence on the first annual, so every year they're celebrating this now, Climate Emergency Day. Last Friday, July 22nd, 2022, was decreed to be Climate Emergency Day because it was the first moment that humanity has officially less than 7 years, and they say 7 years right there, until what many scientists consider the window closes upon keeping global warming below 1.5 Celsius. Now, this whole warming thing, guys, it's all a farce, okay? This is just a system of control. There's just a way to bring in control, and it's a way that they can always point to it and say, oh, yeah, we'd love to give you more freedom, but it just hurts the environment. You don't want to hurt the world, do you? You love the world, don't you? Right? So, they manipulate you emotionally there. They say, oh, come on now. Do it for the Gipper. Do it for the Gaia. Do it for the world, right? That's what they want to tell you. Okay. So here they're planning on celebrating it again. And when do they celebrate it? July 22nd. That's right. On 2023, they'll be celebrating Climate Emergency Day. Ooh, celebrate bad times. Come on. Okay, so they'll be celebrating that. Look forward to that celebration. So when did this all begin, all this madness? Well, long before these times, that's for sure. Go back and watch the video I did on how all the WARs were planned in 1871. And even before that, you could argue. But the Paris Agreement, okay, what is the Paris Agreement? Okay, you probably heard this term, but maybe you're not familiar with it. This is where this current segment of insanity began back in 2015, okay? That was when their 14 years began. So if you're a 14er out there, that was really when your 14 years, according to them, would have begun. And so the Paris Agreement is a legally binding, okay, that's key word, legally binding. Okay, if you remember, when Chuckster, was given a crown, I like how the Bible puts that. It doesn't say he was made king, it just says he was given a crown. You know what I'm saying? There's a difference. Like, here's your crown, buddy, but you ain't no king. So anyway, he was given a crown, and then everybody pledged their allegiance to him, right? And if you notice in that pledge, it says, according to the law, I agree to pledge myself to him. So that makes it sound like it's protecting the person pledging, but it's actually indicting them more, because this is legally binding. Did you agree to this? Were you part of this decision? Did you say, yeah, let's sign that Paris Agreement? Did you even know? Did anybody come and ask you? Were they asking for your input? No, they weren't. But it doesn't change the fact that it's legally binding. So just because it says according to the law, it doesn't mean they're protecting you with that statement. It means you're actually more imprisoned by that statement. So the Paris Agreement is a legally binding international treaty on climate change. Oh boy, isn't that great? It was adopted by 196 parties. Oh, so a covenant with many, I see, at the UN Climate Change Conference in COP21 in Paris, France on the 12th of December. Now remember that date, the 12th of December, 2015. It entered into force on the 4th of November, 2016. Now, I just want to check in because I know sometimes make sure everybody can hear me out there. Okay. Doesn't look like anybody's complaining that they can't, so I always like to double check that because sometimes I get into this and I realize, hey, nobody heard any of that. Okay. So going back here, so 2015, so that's when it all began, okay? And remember that date, December 12th, 2015. It entered into force on the 4th of November, 2016. Remember the 5th of November. Yes, interesting, because there's a little bit of a tie in there too. Okay, so the 12th of December is when this current madness began. Okay, let's keep going. So isn't it interesting that the conference they're having this year ends on the 12th of December? And actually, a few of the years, it usually goes about 12 days, and it's ended on the 12th of December as well. So that's what happens this year, the 12th of December. So if you go to their site, where it talks about COP28.com, you can go to COP28.com. It literally says here, right on the first page, when you open it, and I notice, when doves fly, dun, 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 dun. You got the doves flying over there. Hopefully that's us. Hopefully that's representing us getting out of here. And like, bye-bye, Holy Spirit. So it says, unite, act, deliver. We are at a halfway point. See, that's how they're counting it. It has been 7 years since Paris, with 7 years to go to 2030. Now, I did a couple videos on this. I encourage you to check it out. It's this second one here in the first line, 2,300 days and nights. Check that one out. And I also have a shorter version of it. If you can't take it that long, you can't take much more, Captain, then you can watch this one that is only around 20 minutes long. Okay, but anyhow, this is the way they're seeing it, guys, okay? So he's confirming a covenant that they already had. They already had it since 2015, but he's confirming it this year for another 7. He confirms it for 1/7, right? So, and he's been behind this thing from the very beginning, but he hasn't had the crown until now, right? Okay, so let's look at this. Now, if you remember in those videos in the 2,300 days, I just want to mention this briefly because it ties into what we're talking about today. This is what I'm saying. I did all these videos before, and they all just happen to tie in today. It's just the way the Lord works, you know. He's just always kind of making all the connections for us. So, the coronation of the Chuckification. Just coined that one. Yes, the Upchuckification. The coronation of this dude who was given a crown and also happened to be Passover as well. Don't think it just happened to be. But from that day to December 12th, which is the day that this Paris agreement was officially, how did they word it here? Let's see. On December 12th, 2015, it was adopted. Okay, so it was adopted on December 12th, 2015. So from that day to the other day, from the coronation / Passover to December 12th, which will be the last day this year of that COP conference, is 220 days. And if you remember what we talked about in the other video, is if you add 1260 and 1260, which is the prophetic time period that we're looking at for this 7 years, if it's indeed 7 years, it could be 3.5. I know that's been proposed as well, but a lot of it seems to point to this 7 years, and there's also much to support that also, or at least some scripture to support that as well. So in any case, we know for sure the two witnesses, they get their 1260, and then the Antichrist gets his 42 months, which equates to 1260 also. If you put those two together, you get 2,520 days. Now, from the coronation of the Chuckification and the Passover to December 12th is 220 days. Now, if you subtract 220 days, that leaves you with 2,300 days, which is what Daniel talks about, 2,300 days. So could that perhaps be the time period? Could that be the fulfillment? We shall see, but very intriguing indeed. Okay, let us keep going here. Okay, so 14 years, okay? Just keep that in mind, 14 years. There's your 7 and 7. Which I had actually talked about before as well, the whole idea of this kind of cycle of sevens, and that God seems to work in that, and that even within the 7, we have sort of a cycle of the 3.5. Like we had the first 3.5 was the Mr. T years that were kind of prosperity, and even though it was a lot of persecution going on, you know, it was like the best economy and all this kind of stuff. And then the last 3.5 years have been all this total destruction of things. And so it is kind of an interesting pattern. So this first half, you know, we'll see. We have the two witnesses, and perhaps we'll have a time of, you know, bringing in the sheaves, and then we go into the total destruction yet again. So very interesting, kind of the cycles there. So here we have it again. If you count exactly 14 years from December 12, 2015, when they initiated this, it lands exactly on December 12th of 2029. Now, something to keep in mind is they say they want to complete all these goals by 2030. It doesn't include 2030. By 2030, right? That's very key, because a lot of times we've been talking about 2030, including that as well. It doesn't mean it won't be included, but remember, Shemitah cycles, right? You've got you have your 6 years of working, and then seventh you rest. So just last year was the Shemitah year, that was the rest year, and now we're in the first year, which may also be a Jubilee year, of a new Shemitah cycle of 6 years and then a rest. So that's kind of interesting also. So in any case, they want to have it done by that time. So that's why they're putting it by the end of 2029 or by 2030, right? Okay, let's keep going. And here's the two witnesses. Now, it also ties into this. I just did this video too, and it also ties into this as well. I talked about that in this video with the two witnesses, the timing of the two witnesses. So let's take a look at that briefly, because it also ties in with this. So the other thing that hit me when I saw July 22nd was the fact that when we talked about in the two witnesses video is the possibility that the two witnesses may actually be killed by the beast on March 22nd. So there's a big tie-in with 20 seconds. 22 is big. It's like 22, 22, 22. I mean, there's ways you can make 666 out of that. Like, for example, the one here of last year, for example, when the 7 years began. Let me show you that one briefly. No, not that one. Where is it? This one? Yeah. So last year, if you go, it happened to land on the 22nd of both the Hebrew calendar and the Gregorian calendar. Both landed on 22. So then you have 2022. So that's, if you added like two the 2 of 20 to each of those, you could do 666, I suppose. So like 2 plus 2 plus 2 is 6, and then 2 plus 2 plus the other 2, and 2 plus 2 is 2. So, just kind of an interesting thought there. But anyway, so the two witnesses, if they, which to me would be the most logical time for the two witnesses to show up, as I've shared in several videos, is that Simchat Torah would be the perfect time, because it's the time when the Torah is taught again from the beginning. They start over. They teach the Torah throughout the year, and then they finish it and they start over again. And that weekend is called Bereshit, and that's when that ring eclipse happens as well. In any case, when you count from Simchat Torah, 1,260 days, it takes you to March 22nd. March 22nd lands exactly on Passover. Now, we know Jesus was crucified on Passover. The two witnesses get their 3.5 years, just like Christ did. They also get killed and raised again on the 3.5 days later. And that's when you count from the Bereshit and ring eclipse, and that will take you to 3 days later, which would be similar to Christ. So that's kind of intriguing. But 322 is also interesting, because that is the infamous number of this organization. If you're familiar with these guys, they have this image that they use for their representation, and 322 is the number, and it's always been kind of a mystery. Why is it 322? Do they know the future? Do they know that eventually, finally, because if you think about it, the two witnesses are they're the last man standing, last men standing, literally, before the Antichrist gets full dominance, full control, right? So wouldn't it be interesting? I mean, it's just, what are the odds that might happen on 322 of all days, and that this devil's society will finally have their dominance, will finally have complete rule, they'll finally conquer the saints, as they say, and line everybody up to slaughter them, and they'll finally have full dominion on the earth, what they've always dreamed about. So that got me thinking, and this is a bit of a side thought, so I'm just going to briefly talk about, but then I started thinking, are they using the chronovisor? Like, how are they seeing this? Now, if you're not familiar with the chronovisor, it's the concept that there's a device that can see the future, or they can see the past, and perhaps the future as well. It's it's talked about in time travel places. Oh, here it is, the chronovisor right there. And the idea is that the Vata of the Can and the CI to the A and other organizations have this device where they can see what's going to happen, and so they can make plans according to what's going to happen. Maybe they can't see everything. Maybe there's certain things God doesn't let them see, or I don't know. It's an idea. It's a concept. I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it's real. I'm not saying it even exists. They could just be talking to demons, which is probably really what it is, and it's probably even what this is. Even if they do have something like this, it's probably just it's just a glorified Ouija board, basically, something telling them how to, do this, that, or the other, but it's really just leading them down a dark path. But it did come to mind. I thought of this movie too that was kind of popular that had a similar concept where they see into the future and so forth, and that changes everything. So just made me think: did they see 322? I mean, where did they get that number, and why? How is it that it could possibly line up that way? Similar to 911, right? The two towers coming down also happens to be Jesus's birthday. I mean, it's just intriguing to think about where they're getting these ideas. Okay. So when I went from the date that the two witnesses would be resurrected, the 3.5 days later, 3/27, and I went to July 22nd, 2029, I got 848 days. And July 22nd is, well, I'll explain that date in a second. But there's your July 22nd yet again. And I'll explain why I put July 22nd, 2029 in just a second. But 848 is what I got. I thought that was interesting. I'm like, okay, that's a chiasmus. It's also 8, 4, and 8, which are Jesus's numbers. Jesus in gematria is 444 in English. And he's also 888 in Greek. So I thought that was kind of intriguing. There may be a connection there to Christ. And so this climate clock, was also initiated in New York. And this was back in September 22nd. So basically I'm tying in some 22s here for you that are just interesting. And this is September 22nd of 2020 is when they began this climate clock as well, which was a 922, kind of a double of the 911 there. And when you put this number, this 7 years, they had it at 7 years. This was as of September 22nd, 2020. You put 7 years and 102 days. If you put that into the calculator, that takes you exactly to Monday, December 31st, 2029, or the very last day of 2029 is when that takes you to. So again, they want to accomplish this by 2030, literally. So I thought that was really interesting also. Okay. Now, let me explain to you, if I haven't lost you so far. And then September 22nd of 2020, just to show you that, fell on the fall equinox. It also was right in the days of awe, right after the 2 days Feast of Trumpets, arguably on Psalm Gedalia, which is another time of tragedy for the Jews, a time when their leader was killed and the temple destroyed. So that also ties in an interesting way. So all of these kind of tie into Jewish tragedy, times of tragedy, as well as their feast days. So that's kind of intriguing also. And Psalm Gedalia, Psalm Gedalia says it's the lament of the killing of the righteous governor of Judah of that name, which ended Jewish rule following the destruction of the first temple. Okay, so there it is. So that was the first temple, not the second temple. So if you go to this climate clock page, the one that they put up in New York, you get a different timing here, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I'm not sure what it means. Maybe you guys have some more thoughts on this, but I'll at least share it with you. It says there are 8 years, 41 weeks, 18 hours, 1 minute, and 26 seconds until the climate clock reaches 0. Okay? So they have 8 years there. And if you click this refresh button, it actually refreshes the page for you so that you can see the updated time of the clock. So I don't know if it's off or if this is pointing to something else, or but that didn't refresh at that time. So maybe it stopped refreshing. Maybe this is inaccurate, but maybe it's frozen here for a reason. So in any case, I put that number in to the handy dandy calculator, and I did it from today, because it's supposed to be from today, I guess, 6/30/2023, and of 8 years and 41 weeks. And it brought me to Monday, April 12th of 2032. And that just happens to be the first day of the new year, of the new Jewish calendar year of 2032. You could argue it's the second month, but as we know, depending on where the sun is, it's probably the first month at that point, because it says Pesach Sheni, which would be second Passover, but based on the fact that it's April, it's probably the first month at that point. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, let's keep going. So let's talk about the 6 years and 24 days. I know I've left you in suspense, kind of gave it away there in the previous one if you were paying attention. But basically, 6 years and 24 days from June 28th, when they started this clock, falls on Sunday, July 22nd. There it is again, July 22nd. So again, that's the same one that I just shared that actually with you, if you noticed. Over here, I think it was it this one or was it this one? Yeah, I think it was this one. So this was from when the two witnesses would have been resurrected. If you counted to that July 22nd day that I just shared with you, that's the 848 days. So, okay, let's take a look at this a little closer. So, come a little bit closer. You're my kind of date. Okay, so 6/28/23, 6 years and 24 days takes us to July 22nd, this infamous July 22nd. So, why this date? Why this date? Why this date? Why this date? I mean, every year it seems to fall into a significant place. And the final time is no different, is no exception. Check it out. In July 22nd of 2029 falls exactly on the 9th of Av. Can you believe that? So, I mean, wow. So that's intriguing. Okay, so what they're saying basically is we want to have this whole climate thing done by the 9th of Av of 2029. That's what they're saying. Now, we know the 9th of Av is a very significant day. We talked about it in the last video. Again, I wasn't expecting it to tie into this video, but of course, like I said, we should expect it at this point. The 9th of Av was the day that the two temples were destroyed, first and second temple. The day, arguably, it was the day that the First World War began. And the Jews considered the Second World War a carry-on of that war. So in a sense, they both began on that day. And there were other tragedies that took place in that day and time as well. It's when they brought back. It first started when they brought back a false or maybe not a faithless report, I should say, that they brought back from the Promised Land when they were supposed to enter the Promised Land in Numbers 13, and they came back and didn't give a good report, so God didn't let them go in there. They ended up having to wander the desert for 40 days. So it's been kind of a cursed day ever since then. And so how does this tie in with them wanting to have everything done and tidied up, all their 7-year objectives happen by this day? Could it be that this is where they may choose, if they haven't yet reached it by that time, do they then bring in a final of the Sol of the Ushans? Similar to what the man with the funny mustache did during the second WAR. He brought in the finale of the solving, if you know what I'm talking about. So could it be at that time they say, okay, well, that's it. We're gonna have to go all the way to 11 now, like they do in Spinal Tap, where the amp goes to 11. They might have to take it all the way up and say, okay, now we just got to wipe everybody out at this point. it could be when they send out the T-11 robots, the Terminators or something, something may happen at this point, because notice it doesn't go, they didn't put it to December 12th. It's like they wanted a little safety window in there, it seems, between landing on the 9th of Av, this time of horrific destruction for the Jews, and the devil finally getting his win, so to speak. So he intends to have everything won and tidied up by that day, conquer the saints, if you will, and so that he can just ride it out to the end of the year. So it'd be interesting to see, and I'd like to get your thoughts on what you think, why you think they put it on this day. So also interesting from that, if we go back to our two witnesses potential again, in that video I talked about the idea that the coronation and the man given the crown on 5/6 of 23 happens to be 144 days from Judgment Day, or the Day of Atonement, 9/26/23. So that in itself is interesting. But if you go from this 9th of Av, right, and if you remember, they want to have their 7 years or their 14 years done by 12/12 of 2029. If you go from this date, July 22nd, 2029, to December 12th, 2029, you also get 144 days. Now that's kind of interesting as well. What's also interesting is in the 14th chapter of Revelation, that is when you see the harvest. A harvest happened at that point. Following, 13, Revelation 13 is really where you see the beast take control and conquer the saints, or prevail over the saints. And, Revelation 11 is when the two witnesses are taken out at that point. So could Revelation 14 also talks about the 144 witnesses, or not witnesses, but the 144,000 that Jesus has with him, and that are also sealed in Revelation 7. So could there be a connection there as well to this timing? And isn't it an interesting chiasmus between those two? I thought that was quite compelling. Some closing thoughts for you on all this. What better way to sort of dominate over people, right, than to come as the savior of the people, right? Because people don't want to give in to a dictator, but if you're there to help them, well, then they'll put up with you. And so that's what happened during the whole fake lock of the down that we just went through these past few years, and all of that. It was all in the name of, hey, we're trying to help you. We're your friends, we're your buddies, right? And that's the best way to sell it to you. When they brought the Jews off the cattle cars, they said, hey, you're just gonna take a shower. Like, hey, we were just here to help you. Yeah, you're gonna get some great accommodations and take a shower and just come this way, right? And so they sold it to them as, you're going to a better place, which in actuality they were, because they weren't going to be in that dark place anymore. Praise God. But that's what they're doing. So they're selling it to you, and this is the way to bring in. This is the way, of 1984. If you remember the book 1984, they had what they called the Grande brother. He's big and he is your brother, okay? And this is the way to do it, right? To do it as a, hey, we're not trying to watch you or anything. We're not trying to eavesdrop on your conversations. We're not trying to follow you around. We're not trying to keep track of you. We just want to make sure that you're doing your part to help the world be a better place. So, they have these kind of mantras on here: act today, save tomorrow, right? Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. These are all the things that they put up on these screens. Your actions matter, right? So this is going to become these sort of mantras. This is what they had in 1984, the book. Is the concept of there's this guy watching you all the time, right? He's watching you. But there it was kind of this negative, oh, he's always watching you. But here it's like a positive, yeah, we're watching you, but it's because we want to help you take care of the world that you live in. That's all, right? We're your friends. and they had mantras that went along with them. Now, there's even a TV show that came out recently. It even has the all-seeing eye in the logo. I mean, it doesn't get more direct than that. You may remember this movie too, where he's also on the same jumbotron, and right underneath him, it says one of these mantras similar to what was in 1984 is strength through unity, unity through faith, right? These kind of glittering generality. There's just sort of generic statements of like, yeah, you know, like we just have to stay together, and when we stay together, we'll be faithful. And it's like circular logic, you know, one defines the other. These are the statements that were in that book. War is to the peace, freedom is to the ignorance, is to the strength, and so forth. So these are the kind of things, and this is the kind of things that they would do in the concentration camps also, where they would go in and they would have these kind of phrases like "work is freedom," something like that. Like I remember it over the gateway there in Auschwitz. It's like, albeit freedom, or I forget how it is in German, but you know, work is freedom, you know, something to that nature. So it's the same kind of concept where they're sort of brainwashing you as you give up your freedom, as you give up your rights, as you give up all control, and they're brainwashing you thinking that you're doing something good, and that's it's a good thing. Because you got psychopaths like this who you know, open a jar of mosquitoes, whether or not they have the virus in it or not, the bug in it or not, malaria to the rhea, you know, they could be contaminated. Who knows? But you know, he just like a true kind of. It's kind of like the scene out of the end of 12 Monkeys. If you ever seen that movie, I encourage you to watch it. But it's kind of a weird movie, but it makes a good point. But at the end of the movie, the guy kind of opens up something like this, and it's like, you know, he's just like, oh, isn't this great? Yes, breathe it in. You know, so he does the same thing here in a kind of a psychopathic way, and not surprising at all. But during this same speech, he had this picture up on the board, looked like this, and he said, jokingly, only of course they're not joking, is that we're going to have to get one of these to zero in order to save the planet. And of course, the first one on the list is people. So everybody laughs nervously, because they have every intention of getting rid of the people. You know, some of them probably buy into this propaganda, but it's really just all a lie. It's just all a form of trying to control you. So it's getting rid of the people, getting rid of the services that the people enjoy. It's getting rid of the energy that the people have, and it's getting rid of their carbon footprint, you know, what they're putting out as well. And so it's basically just reducing you to mush, you know, reducing your life to nothing and controlling you and eliminating you. It's a process. It's the same thing that the psychopaths did back during the second WAR, is they just slowly took things away. Right. First, you lose your business, then you lose your house, then you lose your life, you know, and it just kind of goes in that progression. But this is part of the deal, guys, and this is what they're trying to really do. So they painted this picture like, oh, it's just for the environment and so on and so forth. But I'm sorry, you're going to have to stop breathing, right? Because the real way to get rid of carbon dioxide is it's what you expel every time you breathe. So it's really about getting rid of you. That's really what they're saying. So that's the real plan. That's the real agenda. And this goes back to the Georgia of the Guide of the Stone Age. If you remember, that was recently destroyed because that was just a dream they had back then. Now they're like well in motion with it, so they don't really need those stones anymore, nor did they want the evidence that they had been planning this a long time. But and it's harder to find some of these pictures actually online, specifically ones that focus on this first segment. But the first of their 10 commandments, so to speak, on their stone says, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. See, so this whole thing of climate, it all goes back to this. It's all about nature. It's about the world. It's like, sorry, we're going to have to reduce the whole population of the whole world. And they're not talking about, hey, you know, maybe use some birth control and, you know, have 5 kids instead of 10. They're not even talking about that, which would still be a limit of your freedom, but But, they're not even talking on that level, or even what CHINA was doing, where the one child policy or anything. No. They want them all gone, right? They want to wipe it down. We've got 8 billion people. They want to get rid of 7.5 billion of those. That's what they want to do. So if you read these 10 commandments that they have here, that they've been plotting and planning for a long time. So first they want to, get the population down in balance with nature, of course. So that's how they sell it to you. Like, it's a good thing. Let me back this off a little bit so you can actually see these if you can. And then it says, guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. See, when you first read these at a glance, you're like, oh, that sounds pretty good. I don't see what the problem with that is. You got to read between the lines, guys. You got to dig deeper here. So guide reproduction wisely. In other words, they control whether you can have kids at all. They control who's sterile. They control, it's all about genetic modification. It's now we make babies in test tubes. It's like Brave New World, if you're familiar with that book. So when they say guide production wisely according to who? According to them, what they think is wise, right? So they're going to tell you, and they're going to sterilize them. Maybe, I'm sorry, you didn't get selected to be able to reproduce. You're not going to be able to reproduce at all. In fact, we've already made you sterile at birth. That's why right now they're trying to remove all the children's genna of the talia. They're accomplishing that goal. They're just basically getting rid of all the people who are foolish enough to do such a thing or fall for such a thing. They're taking advantage of and just taking care of that right out of the gate. But eventually it'll probably come into law where it's like, I'm sorry, you applied for children, but you're not able to have any. In fact, we're going to have to sterilize you so that you can't have any. So that's part of the deal too, so that they control who's born, how they're born, improving fitness and diversity. It's like what they're doing there is, we're going to make a super race of people. We're going to combine where it's a singularity, and we're going to combine with robots and AI and so forth, and diversity. Diversity sounds good, but meaning like, I'm sorry, you can't have kids because they're not diverse enough, or diversity according to who? According to them. Like what do you consider to be diverse, right? So again, it just becomes they're in control of the whole. They want to be in control of everything. It's like they look at the world like it's this, and this is how they convince themselves, I guess. At least the underlings, the real high ups are Satanists, and they know they're doing evil, and they think it's awesome. But they convince themselves to think, we need to get in control of this wild jungle. If you remember, Bush of the senior said, it's not the law of the jungle, and he talks about, that's how they look at the world. Like it's a jungle, and we have to control all these wild animals, these people, and we have to put them in our little box and get them to do things our way. The next one says, unite humanity with a living new language. Is that AI? Is that computer language? Is that again, that's one world thinking, right? A living new language? What are you implying there? Is that brain chips? Oh yeah, we're going to all talk with our minds. I mean, who knows? It could be anything, but it's a one world concept, right? One language. Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. Okay, again, whose reason? Who's the one who gets to be the reasoner there behind that? So in other words, the one world religion, passion, faith, and tradition. So we're going to rule it. It's going to be our one world religion, and we're going to do it our way, and you're going to submit to that. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. Right. In other words, world courts, because it says that in the next sentence. Define fair laws, define just courts, just according to who? And it says, let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. So there's your world government who's going to define and dictate what you can do as a nation. Avoid petty laws and useless officials, i.e. get rid of the police, right? And things like that they're trying to do now. Balance personal rights with social duties. In other words, I'm sorry, you don't have any rights. You have to do this. Your freedom doesn't matter. Your freedom is secondary. You have to submit to the whole and do what we're telling you to do. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. Again, that kind of goes along with their idea of truth, their idea of love, and their one world religion, probably bowing down to the beast, like he is the truth, and so forth. That's how they would paint it. And be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. So they say that twice at the end. So they look at you as a parasite. They look at you as a bug, as a cockroach that they want to squash, as a wild jungle. They look at you as something destroying the earth. And do they really look at it that way, or is it just because they want it all? They're greedy. They're greedy. They just want to have it all for themselves because they're the cockroaches, really. They're the bugs. They're the parasites. They're the ones going around trying to destroy everybody. We're just trying to live our lives peacefully with one another, and they're the ones trying to destroy you. So they turn it back on you. So that's what's happening here, folks. And what do you think about that? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments and also over in our after video chat. I'm going to be there now for a few minutes after this video, so I hope you'll come over and join me for a few minutes there. You can just click on the first link in the description of this video and join us there. I want to thank Jeannie. Thanks so much for moderating for us, and He Sees All. Thanks for moderating as well. And I look forward to saying hi to the rest of you in the after video chat. But love you guys. And if you haven't already, also please subscribe to our Makayo Ministries channel and our Makayo Music channel, if you'd be so kind. But guys, now's the time to get right with God. Don't wait for this all to go to hell in a handbasket before, and you're literally standing before the beast while he wants to put a mark on your hand and forehead. Now's the time to repent and believe the good news and get right with God. So if you want to know more about that, you can come over and we can talk more about that as well. But guys, I love you. Wishing you all the best and all the blessed. And Maranatha.